Decluttering can be so tricky, especially when you want a place that's organized but also inviting. I've long shared that if it's something that you love and something that you use or something that you need, then it's not clutter. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, clutter is a lot of objects in a state of being messy. I actually think that clutter is very personal, however, because what's clutter to you may not be clutter to me and vice versa. And why does this matter? Because when you understand what clutter is, it's gonna make it a whole heck of a lot easier to deal with it. So today I'm sharing 5 simple steps to help you achieve balanced decluttering. No trash bags required. And let me explain my comment about trash bags because this kind of leads me to my first point. I think that for decluttering, you really need to reframe the conversation around what decluttering truly is. Because decluttering isn't always about getting rid of items or discarding items. Sometimes it's truly figuring out the purpose of your things. So I'm just gonna tell you this little story. There was this girl, she had a pile of clothing clutter on her closet floor. And she was ready to take it all to the donation center. It had been sitting there for months. And finally, one day she got ready to do that. And as she's packing up these items of clothing, she's actually realizing that a lot of them she still liked, and a lot of them were totally wearable. They just needed a little bit of fixing. So she ended up putting buttons on a couple things, a couple stitches here and there, maybe some stain removal, and most of the things that she was planning on getting rid of that had been clutter, she ended up putting them back in her closet and they became valuable pieces of clothing that she is going to wear. There is a saying, use what you have and have what you use. And I think this could be really relevant here. So if you have items in your home and you're unsure if they're clutter, if you want to keep them, try to figure out, can they be repaired? Can they be repurposed? Can they be reused? You don't just have to get rid of them simply because they're not serving their original purpose they were intended. Maybe there's a whole new second life for them. I think this helps you have a more balanced approach to decluttering rather than just wholesale getting rid of things. I have seen a lot of videos encouraging this, and I kind of think that what happens with this is when you wholesale get rid of things, then you end up making mistakes. You end up getting rid of things that you actually need, and guess what? You have to go out and rebuy them or go reacquire them some way, and it's just this cycle of buying things, decluttering. We don't want to do that. Another way you could do this is if you've got a box of tech gadgets, chargers, cords, things that you're no longer using, go through that box. See if there are things. You wouldn't believe the number of useful chargers I've found. I will have something like a Fitbit or a Kindle, and I'll lose the original charger for that, and then I will go to my box that I have of all these leftover chargers and things that we're no longer using, and I will find exactly what I need in there. So try to sort through these items that you have and organize them and see if there's a way you can give them a second life. And listen, before anyone heads to the comments and tells me I'm encouraging hoarding or inhibiting people's decluttering efforts, what I want to say, this video isn't geared towards people who actually have a true hoarding disorder. This video is more so for people who want to have a balanced approach to decluttering. Maybe you're on your way to becoming more minimal and you want to have a balanced approach to doing that. Maybe you simply want to get your space a little bit more organized and functional, and maybe you want to be a little bit more sustainable in how you do that. If this sounds like you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you're not already subscribed, it's free. This brings me to my second point, and it's to relocate rather than eliminate. And I'm just going to give you a couple examples of where I did this and it had really great outcomes. I, of course, am decluttering my attic. I'm still decluttering it. I've done a ton. And I did find up here a whole box of art supplies. And no one was using them. No one had looked for them in years. And ordinarily I would have just donated them. But I thought to myself, you know what? I'll put them downstairs on the back table and see what happens. Well, guess what? They had a whole second life just because I simply relocated those items downstairs in this accessible place. My kids started using them. They started making art projects, and then they needed some of the materials for school. So it was just like a win-win situation. And instead of donating those supplies, I ended up reusing them. Also, I had a whole bunch of blankets stored away in my closet. Just these cozy blankets that I had just stuffed in the closet. Well, you know what I did? Instead of donating those blankets because nobody was using them, I put them in this really cute basket that I had, and I left them in the living room. Well, guess what? Now the kids are using the blankets. They're watching TV, they're using the blankets, and so those blankets Just simply relocating them from my closet to the living room made all of the difference. I think the takeaway here is that sometimes clutter is all about context. So before you decide to eliminate something, just ask yourself, is this maybe in the wrong place? And that's why nobody's using it. The difference between something being clutter or something of value often comes down to the simple fact, is it being used? So decluttering can also mean making things functional again. And this brings me to my third point. Focus on functionality and use. If you watch my channel, you know I talk about functionality a lot. I like to make sure that my house doesn't need to look perfect. The ultimate goal here is it needs to be functional. So we're going to focus on functionality and use. And the way that you can do this, let's say that you have a drawer full of kitchen utensils, and it's so packed that no one is ever using all of the utensils that you've got in there. Well, the reason no one's using it is because when you open the drawer and you don't see it and you don't want to dig through it, it's just too much of a hassle, so nobody uses it. So I say reorganize your kitchen in a way that makes sense and that makes those items useful again. You could reorganize the drawer. You could add drawer dividers, which is what I did. I'll link the ones I used. They made a huge difference in keeping our utensils organized. Also, another thing I did is I moved some of the very highly used things like our potato peeler, for example. That was something we use very regularly. I moved it from the utensil drawer into our silverware drawer so that it was more visible and accessible. And every time I need it, I can just go into the silverware drawer. I don't have to go look through the big utensil drawer. Once things are easier to reach, you will be more likely to use them. I just also want to say I did this in our pantry. We never had a pantry, and I had a bread machine. And it used to be under a cabinet at the very back. And then years ago, we decided to build a pantry. And I specifically said to myself, I want my bread machine very accessible. I dedicated a whole shelf to my bread machine, and now I use that thing every other day at least. I am making so much more bread. I'm getting so much more use out of it, and it's simply because I have reorganized my kitchen to be more functional, and it lets me use the things that I have. And just one more example to really drive this point home, I think you could also do this in your closet. And what I find with my closet is, so I live in a place where there's 4 seasons, so I have everything in my closet from very warm sweaters to tank tops. And it gets really overwhelming to get dressed in the morning when you've got such an array of clothing. It's all together. You can't really see what you have because it's kind of your too many choices and you get overwhelmed. So another way you could do this is you could organize your closet by season. You could have a section for winter, a section for summer. Or you could even pack away part of your closet each season. And then that way you're only faced with the clothing that you're actually going to be wearing at this moment in time. And it just makes your closet so much more functional and your stuff is less likely to become clutter. This next step, if you miss this one, then I don't think any of the other steps are going to work. I'm telling you, I think this is the most important one. I will call it mindful maintenance. The idea is to be mindful of the things that you bring in your home and, very importantly, be mindful of replacement items that you need. First off, what I would say is be very mindful that anything you bring into your home has the potential to become clutter if you're not intentional about it. Some people do things like the 1 in, 1 out rule. That is basically if you are bringing something into your home, you need to remove something else. I also, when I'm shopping or when I'm out and I want to bring something home, I always tell myself, where am I going to store this item? Is it really valuable? Do I actually need it? And I really think long and hard before making those purchases, and I try to be really intentional about that. And really, if I try to do any impulse buying, which I've gotten so much better at over the years, I just always stop myself and I always think twice. And I really think, do I really need this? And I mentioned about replacements because I do think that this extends really well to replacements. So a lot of times when something breaks or you lose something in your home and you think, okay, well, I need to go out and buy a replacement. So I like to really, really think about this. And I try to think about, do I have something else in my home that I can use instead of going out and replacing this item? Or can I live without this item? Do I actually need to replace it? You don't have to automatically default to going out and replacing things or buying something new when something breaks. Okay, we are on to step 5, and it is to future-proof your space. And let me tell you how you can do this. The way I like to think of this one is I like to organize my space in a way that when I need items, in the future, they are available and accessible. So maybe they're not immediately useful, but I know I will need them. Really, the idea is to have these items stored in a way that they're not disrupting your everyday life, but you know you're going to need them. I'm just going to give you some examples so that this is very clear. So one of the things that I did long ago, and I've shared this before, I have certain dishes that I use on holidays. I've got a big turkey roasting pan. I have a Christmas gravy boat. I just have very specific casserole dishes, and they're large. And I host people, I host my family. We have a nice dinner once a year. And I was storing these items in my kitchen. And to me, the kitchen, I don't have a huge kitchen, and my kitchen is very valuable real estate. And I do not want to be storing things in there that I'm not using very regularly. So what I did is I stored these items in a way that doesn't disrupt the aesthetics of my kitchen or the functionality of my kitchen, and I'd store everything in the basement. If you don't have a basement, try to think of a creative place where you can store these things. I mean, a roasting pan can fit under your bed. I don't really recommend storing things under your bed as much, but again, if you don't have the space, that's fine. Just get creative in how to do it, but don't store it in the prime real estate of your kitchen if you're only using it once a year. So if you can set your home up in a way where you have a dedicated space for these future items that you're going to be using, and I'm not saying that you should save everything in case you need it in the future. I'm saying if you know you're going to need it in the future, then figure out a way that you can store it in a way that just doesn't disrupt your everyday life, but it's still there and you're future-proofing your home and you're future-proofing your decluttering efforts. So I hope these tips helped you. If you want to keep the decluttering going, I'm going to link a playlist, so click on it and I will see you over there. Bye-bye.